I'm your host, Jason Hopkins, and honored to have Keith Hayes with us today. Keith is a Denver native and a former gang member who has bravely fought his way to long term recovery from addiction. Today, he serves as the Director of Recovery at 5280 High School, and Keith has dedicated his life to guiding youth towards a future free from the grip of substance abuse. His purpose is nothing short of inspiring to cultivate a generation that thrives in health, finds strength in community, and embraces purpose in every step they take. Join me in welcoming Keith, a beacon of hope and resilience to Nobody's Perfect. Keith, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I know we talked about it a few weeks ago and it took us a minute to get it on the books, but I'm thrilled you're here and think we're going to have a very fruitful conversation today.
Nah, Jason, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you do in the community and having this podcast. And it is so needed in our community, in our society today. So I'm just grateful to be here.
Well, you and I are on the same page, so we're going to have a good show regardless.
I know.
I really was so inspired. We have a few mutual connections that kept bringing me back to 5280 High School. And I really want to unpack what 5280 is, how it's different, what it does. But first and foremost, as I intimated in your short bio there, you have a personal journey of recovery that brings you here. You had mentioned that you were a former gang member. Give us a little backstory for our listeners to understand the passion and purpose that you bring to this conversation as we jump into this.
Sure. So, I grew up here in Denver, Colorado, and this is my city. This is my home.
Right.
And I spent a lot of years causing a lot of harm to my community, to people in that community. Um, and addiction really got a hold of my life, really around the age of 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
And I found myself, started off smoking weed, kind of like everybody else, and then moved more into drinking. And, at that time, I was in high school and I was really struggling with my identity and who I wanted to become. And in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was lots of gang activity and gang members. And, I had to make these decisions in my life about, being an athlete in school or joining a local gang. And obviously, sitting here today, I made some of those wrong choices.
Right.
And, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my experiences. Without experience, it makes it very hard to be able to pour back into other people and to share those experiences. So I'm very open about the things that I've been through and gone through, and going to prison and being incarcerated and being homeless as a result of my addiction. And this disease of addiction does not um, it is open to anybody, right? It doesn't matter your social economic background. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It is an equal opportunity killer. And I've seen that up close and personal in my life and in my journey. And I even see that with our youth today. And I just want to be able to give back and show people a different way to live without drugs and alcohol. And that's my purpose. That's my passion. That's why I feel like I'm alive today.
Right.
And every day is a day to help people. So
Keith, I'm so inspired by that. And while our journeys are very different, I too have had my own journey. I had a mental health recovery journey and feel like, the words I would use if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here. And it sounds like really so much of your formative years coming up really inspired and moved you into this space now that you found sobriety for yourself to be able to serve others, which is the same place that I come from in doing the work that I do. So first and foremost, thank you for your vulnerability and thank you for your service, because I don't think people really realize that sometimes the things that we go to through, while we all have chapters we don't want read out loud, they can be the very thing that guide us to help other people from maybe not going down the path that we've gone down, or even if they did, that to realize there's a walk back from these things and that you can make different choices. So I think it takes people like you who are really showing up and saying, hey, I made those mistakes along the way and look where I am today. And I think that's really important and pivotal. So thank you. I appreciate that.
appreciate you.
You know, when we first met in person, I came to visit at 5280, which is a really novel concept. And you kind of gave me a backstory about how 5280 came into being. For our guests that are listening to today that have no point of reference, like tell us a little bit about 5280. Where did it begin? What has it become? And what is it evolving into?
Sure. So 5280, the idea of a recovery high school here in Denver, Colorado, started in a 12-step meeting with a 16-year-old kid who was clean 6 months off of heroin addiction.
Okay.
And our founder of our school was at that 12-step meeting. She asked him, like, you're half my age. You're 16 years old and you got 6 months clean off of one of the hardest drugs to be able to kick. What did you do to get to this moment? And the first thing that 16-year-old young man said is, I had to drop out of high school.
Wow.
It was too many of my old dealers. It was too many of negative peers. It was so much peer pressure. There would have been no way for me to get this far clean if I didn't drop out of high school. And she just had this burning idea like that this can't be the world that we live in today, where kids have to drop out of high school just to get clean and sober. And that's how the idea 5280 got started. And with a lot of work and due diligence, um, about 4 or 5 years later, after that conversation in 2018, 5280 became a real thing, and we opened up, and we haven't looked back since.
I love that. And what's so inspiring about it, and I think you guys landed on this from the very beginning, was the recognition that you shouldn't have to quit school to be able to get and stay sober.
Yep.
And really understanding that and taking an intentional path of showing up to serve youth that have these challenges with sobriety, really is a forward thinking initiative. And I know from our previous conversation, initially everybody wanted you guys to become a private school and you were being offered funding, and you guys chose a very different route. Kind of explain that to me, because I thought that was really fascinating in creating a stakeholder in the community that we serve.
Sure. So one thing about there's probably about 45 to 50 recovery high schools throughout the entire country. And a lot of those schools are private schools
Right.
where you have to pay tuition to be able to attend that school, to be able to attend that school. And what that does, right, it only allows a certain demographic and population to be able to have access to the school. If you don't have the financial resources, then you can't attend there. So what was very important, and the school was offered people offered millions of dollars up front to make this school a private school and to be able to only serve a certain population of students. And equity is one of our design principles in our school, and that no matter your social economic situation, you should be able to have access to education and to recovery. So we became a charter school in the Denver Public Schools network that allows any school, any youth, no matter what city they live in, to be able to go to our school and to be able to start their journey in recovery and to get clean and sober, all while getting their high school diploma. And that is very important that everybody has access to this school.
Well, I'm reminded of what you said earlier about, going through this journey of addiction and how it doesn't discriminate. By taking the path that you guys have with intention to be a public charter school, you really sort of erased the bar, so to speak, of allowing anybody access to this if they really have a passion and purpose to be there and want to follow the protocol and program that you guys have designed. Like, I think that's pretty phenomenal, because it's breaking some of those stigmas from the get-go that would be exclusionary for so many people that just simply couldn't afford to go to a private school like that.
Agreed, agreed. And even other things that we do, like we have an after school program that we do here for recovery. That is also free to our students. And we're going to open it up actually to the general public as well for any kid who wants to get sober and is willing to work a program of recovery. We want to be able to provide those supports free of charge, um, because that's important. It seems like everything has a dollar cost to it for people to be able to have access to services. And we just feel like everybody, whether you're driving to school in a Tesla or you have to catch the bus here, or maybe you don't know where your next meal is going to come from tonight, and maybe you guys are having steak dinners every night. I want every single kid to be able to have access to us.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, kudos for that model. I mean, whatever the powers would be that came together to make that happen, I think that's incredible that we've kind of level set the fact that everyone has a seat at your table. So let's get into the nuts and bolts now that you've told us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about 5280. You know, as you know, we're building Nobody's Perfect Community, which is a marketplace of resources, and substance use and misuse through the survey and focus groups that we've done always rises to the top of challenges that youth are facing today. Like, you've got your boots on the ground doing this work. Give me some context for what you're seeing, from youth today as far as substances they're using, the ages they're getting involved in it, like help me understand the problem, because I think many people listening don't really understand that this is not just something that happens in a few isolated instances. It's happening in a really rampant way.
It is. It is. That is a huge question, and
It is.
there's a lot of layers to it, right? I will first start off by saying we are seeing our youth getting addicted to drugs and alcohol younger and younger, right? I have some students here who were sticking needles in their arm at the age of 10 years old. That's
Wow.
a real thing. Nobody wants to talk about that, right? But that is what is going on behind the scenes in some of these homes. As far as the drug use, it's all across the board. I have kids here for fentanyl. I have kids here for heroin. I have kids here for meth. I have kids here for cocaine. Maybe we're using all of them, right? Mushrooms, psychedelics is a big thing right now. I actually just had a student who had an overdose on some bad mushrooms and it landed him in the hospital because the mushrooms were laced. Now
Okay.
we know right here in colorful Colorado, we want to approve everything
Right.
to be used, right? And these mushrooms are out here and they're out here a lot more now than they were before. And now kids are getting laced mushrooms that's putting them in the hospital and even in some instances killing them, right?
Mm.
And I think these are all things that we got to think about as we're passing and voting on these laws of what we want to allow people to be able to do. Are you thinking about our youth through these processes, right?
Right. Because we made the access
Marijuana
points more accessible.
makes it very more accessible, right?
Right.
We decided to legalize marijuana and put a dispensary on every single corner, right? And the marijuana that we were smoking back in the day, we're talking 2-3% to 10%. If you had some 10% THC, you had that
We had
fire,
the
right?
good stuff.
You have the good stuff, right? Not very many stems or seeds, right? But now they got these waxes and these high concentrate THCs that have, I have some in my drawer that I confiscated for kids. 85, 90% THC, right? And when you take a brain that is still developing and we're developing that frontal lobe and you're putting that kind of trauma, right? It causes severe harm to our adolescents. I have kids who have been in marijuana psychosis, right? And it has taken them months, sometimes even years, to really be able to get their cognitive, thinking back and their features back and be able to process things. And they still see things as a result of this medical marijuana and things that we have, legalized and have made it so easy for kids to access.
Right.
Um,
Well, and on top of that, I mean, just not only the accessibility, but the delivery means that kids are
oh,
using
I was
today. I
getting
mean,
here too.
you put it in a vape pen and you've got kids that are getting high on 85, 90% concentrate all day long. Like, I don't know how you function.
You're absolutely right. And I'm going to take it a step further. See, today in the age of social media and all the things that are available to our kids, right? It's like Burger King now. You can have it your way, right? You can get drugs DoorDash to you now, right?
Wow.
And now, see, when we used to have to go get drugs, right? You may have to go out onto a sketchy corner somewhere and ask somebody if they got something, and you had to do a cash, hand to hand transfer, right, to get what you needed. Now, kids can go on Instagram. The dealer will put in the emojis of what drugs they are selling, right? You will go into their direct message. You will tell them what you want and how much that you want. You will then Zelle or PayPal or Venmo the funds. The dealer will drop it off somewhere or at your house or whatever. And it really is, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever you need, whenever you need it. Um, and you don't have to even give anybody cash anymore. So that kind of takes away some of that police. I would say some of the fear that people might have around getting drugs because I can pay you electronically now,
Right.
right? And I can use my parents' debit card or credit card to do so. So even
And
how
I'm
they
reimbursing him for pizza.
that's it. That's
Right.
it, right? So even what they put, what it was for in the services, it is just a whole different ball game. It's very hard for the police to be able to manage all these things. And I've had dealers try to come up to the school and drop packages off for kids. So it's real. It's real. And we have to be in tune to what's going on with our kids and kind of be in their business more than maybe we had to in the 90s or the early 2000s because of how accessible everything is now
Right.
for our
Right.
kids.
So when we talk about the gifts of technology, which there are many, this is one of those instances that it's actually, other than the convenience, it's not serving anybody well to make this that accessible.
Yep, that is absolutely correct, and it's crazy. And the kids show me. They show me like, Keith, look how easy it is to do this. Look how easy it is to get this. Right. So that's how I learn all these things is talking with the kids and learning with the kids and passing that information back down to my parents so they can be informed of what's going on. And yeah, it's the wild wild west out here right now.
It's interesting. So we did a survey project this last year, specifically for youth and families, and overwhelmingly, I was shocked at youth reporting their mental health as fair or poor about 72% of the time. And we had a pretty broad survey set that we surveyed from. And then you ask their parents the same question about their perception of their youth's mental health, and it was like 30 or 32%. So there was a huge disparity between what youth were self-reporting and what their parents were reporting that they were seeing. And again, I'm not here to vilify parents. I think we're having these conversations to educate them.
Yep,
But to the point you made a minute ago, drugs today are different. Like flat out, like whatever experience you had 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's not the same.
it's not.
The world isn't the same, and the accessibility is different. But the reality is, I don't think you get one without the other. And we have a huge responsibility to educate parents. And in your role of kind of serving youth specifically, where do the parents land in this? Like, I mean, is this new information that you're giving them all the time? Like, do they not care? Do they like help me understand a pulse on what are you seeing from parents?
I think a lot of times what I learn is when the kids finally self-report or the parents figure out what their kids are actually doing, they're usually anywhere from 6 months to maybe even 2 years behind when this all started. Right? So they're not even in the loop a lot of times of this has been going on for a while. Now I know. I thought this just started to happen, and it's actually been going on behind the scenes for a long time, right? And I think it's just parents getting that information and truly understanding when did your kid's addiction start? What did it start with? What does it look like today? Understanding all the different substances that they have tried or they are currently addicted to, and it is a constant conversation with my parents about things to look for, how their pupils may look, warning signs, their behaviors and their attitudes, and how those things will change prior to maybe a possible relapse happening, all these different things. And I probably spend more time counseling with parents than I even do counseling with the kids and just helping them work through all the things they have to navigate as a parent because there is no handbook to deal
Right.
with the kid that is struggling with their mental health and that is struggling with addiction, right? And we need to wrap our arms around our parents and really be able to support them and empower them to still be able to be accountable and firm with their kids, but also giving lots of grace and love and understanding where their child is at. And it is a fine line that you have to kind of walk and understand of what you're dealing with. And it's a process. And I
Well,
would say,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, what I love about a recovery high school is it is a phenomenal mechanism for recovery because you get years with the parents, you get years with the students, and we really get to pour into both of them and really help that family become whole again, where trust is gained again and
Right.
there's respect again and all these different things. So this is not like some 6 month or 3 month inpatient where we send you to treatment and then we say good luck to you. We really get to pour into our students and our parents for years. I think that really helps bring the family back whole again.
Well, I think you're so spot on, and frankly, it's why you don't get one without the other. And when we, first imagined this concept, I really imagined it from being informed by youth to educate parents and inspire conversations between them. And I think one of the things that really contributes to the challenges that we see is that you've got teens that are natives to technology and you have adults that are adapted to technology. And there is a disconnect there that I think when you talk about it 6 months to 2 years before parents often find out, not to place all the blame on the parents, I just literally think socialization has changed among our youths. The way they interact is far more nonverbal than it used to be. And the reality is most parents, even if they wanted to go looking, don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of times when your kid is in their room, right, and they're not bothering you, right, and they're just in their room and they're doing their thing, and you think everything is fine, right?
Right.
You think everything is cool. You're not thinking that your kid is literally in their room getting high or under the influence, right? And you just kind of think that it's business as normal. It's not like when we were growing up, Jason. Like we were outside, right?
Right.
We lived outside. We
Right.
couldn't wait to get outside, right? Like, hey, let me
And we
get my
certainly
chores
didn't live on a
done.
phone.
Yeah, let me get my chores done and let me get out this house. I don't even want to see my mom. I'm trying to go hang out with my friends.
Right.
And it's a lot different today. I think people don't feel safe with their kids out like that anymore. And with the technology, the video games and the cell phones and all the things, kids are at home, but they're isolated. And in those situations, there could be some things going on behind the scenes that you're just very unaware of.
Well, and I'm guessing to a point you touched on earlier, you don't really get substance use likely without having some mental health components to it. So, what are you seeing as far as the negative effects on mental health of the types of students that you're serving?
I mean, especially coming out of the pandemic, right? We've seen the mental health crisis in our young people just really increase, right? And I think those things go hand in hand. I say this all the time, right? When mental health gets better, the addiction gets better. When addiction gets better, the mental health gets better. And it's always that question of which one came first, right? But at the end of the day, they go hand in hand. And I have kids who are struggling with their mental health today, and their solution to those struggles with their mental health is to use drugs,
Right.
right? And then
Right.
I have kids who started using drugs just because it was fun or it was a way to build connections with their people, right? And now, as using those drugs for a long period of time, it has severely impacted their mental health.
Right.
And and I mean, and I think that's it, and that's the key. And how do we get to a place where kids can get to a place in their recovery and their mental health journey where they just do not want to put any mind altering substances into their body because
Right.
they are content and happy and comfortable in their own skin. And
Right.
those are the things that we really talk about and work on here at 5280.
Well, I think about the differences between earlier generations versus the one we have today. I think there's so many kids that that dive into this kind of dark world very early. Like I don't think kids really ever have an opportunity to establish what is their baseline. What is their mental health baseline? What is their non-addicted baseline? So when you talk about resolving some of these things and trying to move into long-term recovery, there's not a good goalpost for anybody to look at because they don't really know. When we did this survey, the reason we ended up doing a youth survey is we got funding to do an 18 plus survey, and we started meeting with stakeholders, and after 10, 15 conversations, everybody said 18 is not young enough to have any of these conversations, which I knew. And so we went backwards and said, okay, well, where do we start having the conversations? And what we landed on was 14 because that's when a kid can be involved in their IEP in the state. But the reality that came from those conversations is we could have started that much earlier. And when you listen to the people that treat youth today, by your own admission here, like these problems are starting before 14, not for everybody, but for many kids. And the subsequent negative consequences aside from being an addict, mental health consequences, et cetera, all of the negative consequence, like it's just a domino effect that plays out over the course of years, starting earlier.
Agreed, agreed. And that's the thing, right? Like, how do we figure that piece out? How do we figure that piece out? How do we start to have these robust conversations with young people? And it's probably going to have to be in the school setting, right? In that fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, and really start to have these open dialogues about mental health and about drugs and the negative impacts and all these different things. But we got to stop doing it in a way of like dare, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, you bring the police officer to the school, they talk
Right.
about drugs, right? We should maybe be more truthful. The truth is, drugs are phenomenal. Drugs are great. They are. There's a reason why we get addicted to them. There's
Right.
a reason why we like them until they stop becoming so fun and they
Right.
stop becoming so great. Right. And we got to stop telling people that they're so bad because when we do that, you're just pushing kids to say, well, I got to go find out for myself. Right. And maybe we start changing the narrative around these conversations. Right. Start telling kids that therapy is great. Right. And meeting with a counselor or a mental health professional is awesome. So you
Right.
can have somebody who you can be vulnerable with and open with and start talking through some of the things that you're feeling and that you're seeing and that you're struggling with, right? And stop stigmatizing these things to get kids to be wanting to be more open and vulnerable and having these conversations would be great.
Well, I'm inspired by the world that you're telling us about. And I think it starts with conversations like this. I mean, you and I are pro having the hard conversations and the pretending my fifth grader doesn't need to hear about that. And there are certainly instances of fifth graders who would have no point of reference and no relevance to having that conversation. But there are many who are at that tipping point of needing that information and having it could make all the difference in the next thing. I'll tell you the reason I think we're not having these conversations more broad scale is nobody wants the liability of like, if I open Pandora's box, like now I have to do something about it. And again, it is not vilifying anybody in the system. That is not my goal here. But the fact of the matter is, by us pretending that it isn't happening and then being reactionary when it does, instead of being responsive before it happens, to me is a missed opportunity.
I agree. I agree. And I guess the next question we would have to say is, well, what we're doing is not working.
Right.
So we have to be willing to say, maybe we need to revisit how we're going about doing it and what it looks like, because what we're doing is only escalating and getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And what I do understand is that I'm not in this business to fight the cartel, right? I'm gonna let somebody else deal with that. But
Right.
how can we support these kids and serve them? Because it's gonna be there. How can we help them say, no, that's not what I want for my life?
Right. Right. And I think the tools and the resources necessary to do that are different.
Mhm.
They are different and they do change. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, these things are happening and us pretending anything other than that, it is really just kind of burying our head in the sand.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
It's interesting to me because you talked about statistics a minute ago and you were doing so in a broad way. And I've been a mouthpiece in so many rooms. Like I have asked repeatedly, show me a statistic that is trending downward in any of the things we're talking about here today. And it's crickets. Like I don't know of one. And again, I don't want to make it a system problem because I think we have a system that was built to be reactive and not be responsive. And the problem is so much bigger. And especially post COVID, like we're all trying to catch up to how do we meet the demand that was placed on us through a pandemic that affected all of us.
Yeah, yeah. The stat that scares me the most is, people age 15 to 38, the number one killer is fentanyl, right? That's a scary stat, right? And
And that's a broad range, Keith.
it is. It's a
Like if
very
you think
broad.
about it, the 15-year-old brain versus a 38-year-old brain, you would think there's not a straight line there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm seeing it. I got kids here who are on, MAT services, medically assisted treatment, who are on Suboxone so they can get themselves off of the fentanyl and start to, level down and dose down and doing harm reduction for a 14-year-old, right? It sounds crazy, but that's the world that we're living in where we got kids, on medically assisted treatment at 13, 14 years old. That
Right.
is the seriousness of where we're at right now.
Well, you teed that up for me perfectly because I was going to circle back to, so the 5280 principle, the high school was founded in 12-step principles. And you just affirmed that you've got kids that are doing medically assisted treatment also. like, are there other recovery programs or models that you also integrate as part of this, or is it primarily focused on the 12-step principles and then additional resources as needed?
It really is broad, and I wouldn't even take it as far as built on 12-step principle.
Okay.
I would say that first off, we believe in all pathways to recovery, and one of our requirements to attend our school is to work an outside program of recovery. And what's
Okay.
most important to me is that a kid finds whatever works for them. I have kids that are in Dharma recovery. I have kids that are in Smart recovery. I have kids that are in Full Circle, and that's a youth 12-step program. I have kids who are doing outpatient programs and getting that therapeutic lens. It's whatever works best for you. We are all open for it. And when we do our recovery meetings, it's more about just recovery principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I learn how to become honest today? For the last 4 years of my life, I have been a compulsive fabricator of the truth.
Right.
I've lied to my parents about where I'm at, who I'm with, what we're doing, using drugs, stealing, all these different things. And I have to learn to become honest today. Not just honest with everybody else, but I got to be honest with myself and admitting that I have a problem and that I'm willing to work on that problem and I'm willing to push myself to grow, right? How do I become disciplined today, right? We talk about that a lot. How do I create a work ethic? Over the last year or two of my life, I haven't had a work ethic unless it was around getting more drugs,
Right.
right? How do I work on becoming more disciplined and having a work ethic? How do I become willing? How do I become willing to be willing to be willing when I don't want to get up and come to school, when I don't want to do the work, when I don't want to show up? How do I continue to become willing? Right? How do I have courage today? A lot of what we deal with in addiction and our mental health has to do with fear, right? And how do I learn how to navigate around those fears and really practice that principle of courage on a daily basis, right? And it's those kind of recovery principles that we talk about on a daily basis. And those are all student driven, peer driven. I
Mm-hmm.
meet with the leadership recovery team here, which is a group of students, and they decide on the topics and kind of what's going on in their lives. And they share their experience, truth, and hope with each other, during the day. We do 2 recovery meetings a day. And it's really them. And that's really where the magic is at our school, where that kid who's got 3 days clean off of meth hears a message of depth and weight and hope from another student who looks like them, sounds like them, has got their same experiences. That is where the power is at. That does have some 12-step kind of principle in it, being very peer driven. We're a
Right.
very peer driven school, and that's where the real energy and magic at our school is when the kids are helping each other in their journey.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking to myself, like, the tools that you just talked about that are being, so beautifully guided through your program. Like, imagine if every school had that.
Yeah.
Addiction aside,
Yes.
imagine if we were teaching people about showing up for themselves and taking action and having hope and fostering resilience among friends and our friend groups. Like, you take all of that, like, really, aren't those kind of the recipes for successful living that any
It,
of us should aspire to?
it really is. I mean, if we did that in all the schools and even as adults, right? What kind of culture would we build? Right. Another thing that we do here is restorative practices. And restorative practices, you have to have a mindset for restorative practices. How do we deal with conflict in a healthy way? And how do I work through negative situations or harm that was caused to me in the classroom, outside of the classroom, with a staff member, with the teacher, with another peer? And how do I learn how to work through those things in a healthy way? Because also my go-to when I have negative things happening or harm is caused to me or I get into it with somebody is I go get high behind it. I go have a drink behind it,
Right.
right? And we have to also teach them how to navigate very difficult conversations with each other, with staff members here, so they can learn to be able to go execute that in the real world. Because if I get into it with my boss, right, I have to know how to navigate that situation in a healthy way if I want to be able to keep my job.
Well,
And
really,
those
you're
are
helping
things,
them put tools in their toolbox. Like,
that's it.
instead of
That's
saying,
it.
I'm going to go and do this unhealthy coping mechanism, I have tools that I can grow on. and use to help me really show up in my best way today.
That's it. That's it.
So
That's
if
it.
I'm a parent that's listening and I have a youth that's struggling, like help me understand, or help a parent understand, what's the experience at 5280 like? I know I have a kid that's struggling. We've
Sure.
had a lot of different iterations of this in our home. Like, we want to help them. This might be a fit for us. Tell us about that process of somebody getting acquainted with 5280 that could lead to their kid going there.
Sure. I'm gonna walk you through a normal day at 5280.
Okay.
So you're gonna show up to school, and the very first thing we're gonna do to get the day started is we're gonna have a recovery meeting,
Okay.
right? Um, to give you an example, today's topic the kids had is how do I match calamity? It was how do I match calamity with positivity, right? That was the topic that the kids came up with, right?
Great.
And in their lives, there's chaos, there's calamity, there's things that happen, and how do I match that with positivity? And the kids all shared their experiences of what they're currently doing in their life to be able to work around some of the things that pop up in their life and how they deal with it in a more healthier way today. And that was the topic, and that goes for 45 minutes. That is how we start our day. We want to get recovery centered before we go into our first major class. Okay.
Okay.
Our school is also a project based learning school. And I have learned that working with kids who have struggles with their mental health and with addiction, 80 and 90% of our kids either have an IEP or a 504. So even our learning pedagogy has to be in tune with what's going to help set them up for success. So our school is not one of those schools where you're going to study, 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 take a test, study, 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 take a test. We want to teach the same standards of a particular subject by creating and doing projects. And the kids get the opportunity to learn 21st century skills, how to problem solve, how to critical think, how to collaborate well with others. And we want to do real world projects that the kids can find value in and have say in what they're learning and what they're doing in the classroom. And they'll go into their first period class after that. To give you
Okay.
some examples of projects that we've done, like we have bought a trailer, and the kids have built a tiny home on top of the trailer, and they put a shower in there and a bed in there, and we donated that trailer to a homeless man who has a truck, and he does great work in the community, but he didn't have anywhere to go take a shower or maybe really sleep comfortably at, so we
Wow.
gave we gave him that tiny home for him to be able to utilize, right? And that also goes into the principle of being of service, right? Being altruistic, doing things for other people and not expecting anything back in return. Because in an act of addiction, we've been very selfish and self centered. We want to teach our kids to be altruistic. But they would then go into their first period class. And right now, we're doing a lot of recovery related academics right now. So they would go into their first class. It may be physics, and they'll work on something in physics. They're doing biology actually right now, where they're learning about how drugs affect the nervous system and affect your brain. And they're learning about that in biology. Then after biology class, then you may go into math class where they're doing statistics and they're doing addiction and recovery statistics, right? And they're doing math concepts, right? But they're doing it around something they can find value in, right?
Wow.
So they're doing that right now. Then they may go to a visual art class after that and get an academic elective in. Our kids are very talented artists and they can do phenomenal things. So they'll go into visual art and do something there. After visual art, lunch was in between all that. Then the kids will go to what is called crew. Crew is our version of advisory, where we do a lot of social and emotional things in there. We do competitions, we play games, we have a lot of fun. We go out into the community, and we may have crew day, where it's like a field day, and we get kids running around and moving around and just having fun. So crew's an opportunity for us to just community build with each other. There's two staff members as crew captains, and sometimes the kids lead things or the crew captains lead things. They do crew for 30 minutes a day. And then after that, they go into their final recovery meeting of the day, and we end the day in recovery. We want to start the day in recovery. We want to end the day in recovery. And most of the academic work that we do in class, because I want kids to be able to leave our school and go focus on their recovery. And a lot of our kids go do their IOP program or their recovery program later on that day.
Okay.
They do that. By the time they're done with that, guess what, Jason? It's time to go to bed. They
And
go
start
to
all
bed
over.
They go to bed. Nobody asked them to get high today. Nobody pressured them to give them drugs. They didn't have to deal with that type of stuff. They did recovery all day. They go to bed. It's another day sober, and we do it all over again tomorrow. And before you know it, your student now has a year sober, and you're like, wow, how did we get here? And we did it with having a structured system that supports kids in their recovery, that loves on them, that shows them the support that they need. I have trauma therapists here that meet with kids. I have recovery coaches that meet with the kids. We even have teachers here in recovery. So they get lots of recovery supports from people who understand it, who get it, who have the lived experience. And that makes all the difference.
Well, and really, you're meeting kids where they are, and the reality is, while schools do their very best job to adapt to the individual needs of each student, what
Yeah.
you're offering is more personalized and more realistic to the types of students that you're serving, and tailoring those project-based learning models to things that are applicable and they understand and have interest in, to me feels like a recipe for success.
Yeah, and I'm really excited too. Next year, we're going to do more of creating projects that we'll have set up for the kids and allowing them to pick which classes they want to take based off of what project that they want to do, and really giving them ownership of what they're learning and what they're actually doing. Um, so I'm really excited for that, just to give them some more student voice.
I love that. I love that. So, two questions came up for me. First and foremost, how many kids are you guys currently serving?
Right now, we serve about 100 students. We are
Oh,
currently the largest recovery high school in the entire country. Most recovery high schools are anywhere from 10 to 30 kids.
wow. So, what you're doing is working, Keith.
It is. It is.
And
And,
what would you say? I mean, again, I'm not going to hold you this, but what would you say your success rate is like?
looking at the numbers and the stats that we have, I'll give you these numbers from last year's graduation.
Okay.
Graduated 34 kids. There was over 90 years of sobriety amongst those kids. Those kids had been to, if I remember correctly, like around 100 treatment facilities. Um, they may have crashed like 30 or 40 cars. They had recovered as a whole like 19 years of high school credit combined. Um, every single one of those kids was accepted into college. Um, I think that kind of tells you, what some of our success looks like. And these are kids who have been to numerous treatment facilities, inpatients. Oh, there was like 85 overdoses amongst those 30 kids as well.
Wow.
Uh, and powerful numbers. And they've been able to recreate their lives and have a life they never thought was possible. And 85% of our kids in the first 90 days of being here report a better quality of life than when they started. So
I love it. Well, and for all intents and purposes, you gave a future to, 34 kids that society probably would have counted out.
yeah, and
That's
and that,
phenomenal.
and there was also there was an arrest too. I think it was 44 arrests also out of those 30 something kids as well.
I can
And that's
just imagine these recovery conversations. I mean, there's plenty to talk about there every day, I'm guessing.
Oh, listen, and that's the thing that, and that's the cool thing is like we all got a war story. Our kids have a lot of war stories, and they have learned now how to talk about their recovery story.
I
Right. And
love it.
how cool is that?
So let me ask a random kind of personal question here. How do you stay centered in your own sense of purpose and passion in doing this work? And I mean, I know obviously that's being modeled through these success stories, but like what keeps you centered in this work?
I think the main thing is I have to take care of myself.
Right.
Right. I think that means I am into 12-step recovery. I'm a part of a 12-step fellowship. That means for me continuing to go to meetings, because one thing I've learned is that people who do not go to meetings do not know what happens to people who do not go to meetings. Right. So I see still adult newcomers and young people coming into these meetings not well, faces all sunken in, bruised up, beat up from being out there in active addiction. It reminds me of how important it is for me to stay in the middle of the boat on my own personal recovery. Because the truth is, if I go back out, if I relapse, that's it. That's it. So I gotta be taking care of myself. everything that I ask the kids to do, I have to be willing to continue to do myself, right? And it's very important that I walk it like I talk it. So going to meetings, meeting with my sponsor, sponsoring other people outside of my job. This is my job in my career, but outside of here, I still need to be of service to the community. I need to do extra things outside of my career. And that's what really helps me stay centered and locked in on my purpose and what I'm supposed to be doing by making sure that I'm doing self care and taking care of my mental health and doing the things that bring me joy. And, that is being of service to others outside of the school as well. And I think that's what helps me continue to stay on track. And I talk to the employees here all the time about you got to be taking care of yourself. You can't take care of nobody else if you're not taking care of you. And that's very important. This organization does a great job of making sure that we have mental health days and making sure that we're taking care of our own wellness and that we're okay so we can show up and do this work because it is very challenging, right?
Well, I was
Um,
going to say, and even though you've got it all dialed in and pulled together here, like every day's a different day, I'm guessing.
it is. It is.
And you have to
No,
be ready for whatever it throws at you.
there is no day that is alike. And as great as our numbers are and our stats are and the kids that we serve, like we deal with tragedies too on a regular basis, right? You do this work long enough, you serve this many kids who have had these kind of struggles, and I at least you lose one student a year to an overdose, right? And a lot of people don't want to admit that and talk about those things because they want to seem like everything is butterflies and unicorns, and it's not. It's not. Our kids are out here dying, and that's a real thing, and that's something that we need to continue to speak about and make some changes around. I had a 14-year-old freshman girl die a couple of years ago who was on fentanyl, and because she had Medicaid and there was no Medicaid beds available, right? And she's got a bed reserved, right? 3 months in advance, right? She dies in between time of that because there's not enough resources and inpatient services available to our youth here in Colorado. And those are things that I have issues with and struggles with. And we were trying to get her the help that she need. And in between time of us waiting on a bed to come available, she died from an overdose. And we got to have
And those
those
stories
conversations
never get
too.
better. I mean, they just don't.
No, they don't.
You
They
know,
don't.
and I think the reality of you're going to lose people along the way. Not everybody makes it out of this fight. I mean, as hard as that is to own, I mean, it's the reality of the situation we face. It's the same in mental health. Not everybody is going to make it out of this struggle. you know, Keith, I guess, to end on an inspirational note, aside from all the incredible things that you're doing, like if I'm a parent that's listening and I think something's going on with my kid and maybe I don't really know yet, maybe I haven't confirmed that there's an active addiction going on, like what do you think's a starting point for a parent to get more engaged, to check under the hood, so to speak?
Think the biggest thing is you have to build relationships with your kids, especially as they continue to get older. You want to have an open line of communication where your kid can feel comfortable in being vulnerable with you and talking with you about some things that they're struggling with. But if they have to be so concerned about how you're going to respond, how you're going to react, and what that looks like, that can make it very challenging for a kid to get open. You bring any kid to me and you give me 15 minutes with them and they're going to be talking to me about everything, right? And it's
Same.
that having that ability to be able to just say, hey, look, it's no judgment. I want to help you. I want to support you. I want to be there for you. Even if this is tough, even if I'm not going to like what I hear, right? I want you to be able to feel comfortable that you can come talk to me and then we can have these very open and uncomfortable conversations about whatever it is because I just want to support you and be able to help you. And I think that's very important. If you want to be able to get your kids to open up and get underneath that hood, maybe sharing some things that you've struggled with or been that some of your vulnerabilities as an adult. Because I think a lot of times kids forget that adults are humans too, and
Right.
that we got our own struggles behind the scenes, and then we got things that we're going through, and maybe being more vulnerable with your kid about maybe some things you're struggling with will help them to be able to be like, man, dad just told me some crazy stuff. Let me let him know what's going on with me too, because maybe he'll understand it a little bit better than I thought he may understand it, right?
Yeah, I think that's so important. That what I heard from you there, the word that I think is so important is that word judgment, and being able to be a safe space for your kid and to show up. And like, it's not about assessing blame or your ability to be a good parent or not. I mean, the reality is it's that human need we all have to be seen, valued, and heard. Like, and I understand how as parents it can be incredibly complicated to know what the connection point is with our youth, but it could be as simple as, sparking a conversation that can lead to the next conversations. And, again, I go back to it starts with conversations like this and inspiring people just have that 20 seconds of courage to be vulnerable. And it can make all the difference in everything that comes next.
My man, it is. It really is. And, sometimes those conversations are life and death conversations.
Right.
And you want your kid to really be able to feel that it is a safe space and that they can have this very vulnerable and challenging conversation and know they're going to be supported and still loved. And you said it, not judged. And that's the thing I always tell kids when I first meet with them or whatever. I say, hey, look, I just go into my whole little quick backstory about what I've done, the harm that I've caused, the drugs that I've used, the things that I've done to people, everything. So they can know that, like, look, I'm the last person that's going to judge you. I
Right.
just want to understand all what's going on so I can help you and meet you wherever you're at. And so we can get you the proper services and support that you need. Because that's the other thing, too. If you only tell your parent just some things, right? Yeah, I just been smoking weed, Dad. I kind of been struggling with that. But the truth is, you've been doing cocaine too. Dad needs to know about that cocaine because that cocaine or that meth or maybe a little bit of fentanyl, whatever, is a different level of care that you need than just the marijuana. So I just being able to put all those cards on the table and kids to feel comfortable in that space is a big deal. It really is.
Well, I think it's both parties showing up with responsibility to move the conversation forward. Keith,
Agreed.
I want to assure that I've given you and 5280 the appropriate love in this conversation today. I'm so grateful for everything you shared with us. Is there anything we didn't cover that you think we need to cover?
I'll just say that 5280 is open to any youth who has a desire and willingness to want to be sober. We also help students who deal with self-harm, eating disorders, and other destructive behaviors, and around their mental health as well. And then we're open to anybody who's open to trying to get well, and that's what we're here for. We provide transportation as well for maybe families who live further away from our school. We're right here in Southwest Denver. And I just want to help every single parent and every single kid who doesn't feel like they belong, who feels like people are judging them and who don't get it. What I can promise you is that we get it here. We understand. And we just want to be able to meet you wherever you're at and be there for you. That's what matters to our organization. That's what matters to me. I was you and I've been through a lot. And I just don't want to see you have to continue to go down the path that you've been on. And I can tell you that there is a solution, there is a way out, and we just want you to come home.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. One last question we always like to ask our guests on the ending note is, what does nobody's perfect mean to you?
Wow. I think that when I first think about that, it's like we're all human, right? We're all human. We all have defects of character. We all have things that we're struggling with. We all have fears. We all have uh, things that we want to be better in, right? And I think that being able to own that and take responsibility for that and be willing to just push ourselves to try to be the best version of ourselves is all that anybody can ask for. And that nobody is perfect. But there's people out here who are trying to help like Jason is, and just being out here in the community and being a voice in that mental health and substance use realm is everything. And we all have what I like to say is our own set of gifts. And it's important that we're just leaning more into those gifts and not being so caught up in what the bad things people say about us or their opinions about us. And if we lean into our gifts and hone in on those, the world would be a lot better place.
That's beautifully said. Keith, I want to thank you for being here today. It is such an honor and gift to have had you.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing. And oh, one more thing I want to put out there as
Yes,
well.
please.
May 9th and May 10th, 5280 High School is having our first Youth Recovery and Wellness Conference. This will be a robust opportunity for our students to talk to you guys about what they've been learning here at our school around recovery and wellness. I will have just about every single mental health and substance use disorder provider that can make it at this event. They will be tabling. There will be an opportunity for parents and school professionals and students and youth through all the metro area to come to this to find out about what resources are available to you in the mental health and substance use and eating disorder realm. And this is going to be a phenomenal opportunity. You will never get another opportunity to have all these resources underneath one building for 2 days. And it's going to be a game changer for their community. I'm super excited about it. We're going to have our 5280 fundraising gala that night. And we just want to be able to get the word out about youth recovery and wellness and the community. And please reach out to me if you would like to learn more. And just, I'm super excited about it. It's going to be an awesome time.
I love it. It's going to be an incredible event, and we can't wait to help support you in promoting this. And for anybody that's listening, thank you for being part of Nobody's Perfect Community, dedicated to supporting, inspiring, and empowering youth and families. We hope you enjoyed today's transformative conversation. And together, we're dismantling stigma and providing solutions for mental health and well-being challenges so everyone can thrive. Join us every other week on cozy101.com/imperfect or on your favorite streaming platform to continue embracing our shared human experience. And follow us at Nobody's Perfect Community on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I'm your host, Jason Hopkins. It's been a pleasure having you here. Stay connected, stay inspired, and remember, nobody's perfect because perfection isn't real. Your story is. Until next time.